Okay.
Ruchot habaot. Welcome everybody. Chodesh Tov. Today is Rosh Chodesh Adar. Adar Aleph, right? And we say Mishneh Nichnas Adar. Marbim Mismecha. Okay, so we're going to have a little fun today.
Okay.
So, can I tell you a Pesach joke?
Yeah.
It's early.
It's not too far behind.
But somebody told me this yesterday, as we were, we had a little ceremony yesterday, putting up the mezuzahs in the new edition. So anybody that sponsored a mezuzah or some of the other donors came and they put up the mezuzahs. And someone noticed that at each of the rooms there's a little gray sign, gives the name of the room, and it's in black bold type, and it's also in Braille. So somebody said to me that he told a joke that a rabbi invited his friend, who was a priest, happened to be blind, to his Seder. And they handed the priest a piece of shmura matzah. He rubbed his hands back and forth against it, across it. He said, "Who wrote this, John?" So, first we want to thank and acknowledge the sponsors for our class, and actually all the learning sponsors. So our particular group, so Rita Geller is our main sponsor, plus we have someone else who sponsored the Sfarim, and we see the only two left, so we did pretty well in terms of that. And of course all the people that sponsor learning programs here in the shul. There are many of them, and we're grateful to that. Also, we need to recognize the work that Mindel does. Mindel sets up the refreshments for us every week, so we appreciate that. Thank you. She shops for them, sets them up, so thanks for that. I'm going to ask you each to give me your names and email. We'll pass around a sheet in case we need to get a message out to everybody. We'll have emails for that for you. Okay, so now we're starting. If you're using the Hebrew version, so it's Daf Kuf Beis. The first side, Kuf Beis Amud Aleph, the very bottom. And if you're using the English, so if you're opening up from the left side, we're on page 223, the second paragraph. Okay, so we were talking about what happens if you need to bench and you also need to make Havdalah, and you have 1 cup of wine or 2 cups of wine. What are all the rules? So if you remember way back when we started, we had a discussion about how late are you permitted to eat on Erev Yom Tov, Erev Pesach in particular. So we talked about Mincha Katana, Mincha Gedola, Plag Mincha, and all those different concepts. And what the Gemara came up with was that you were allowed to eat up until what's called Samuch LeMincha, means close to Mincha. And they talk about Mincha Katana, which is, Mincha Katana, if you remember, is 9.5 halachic hours into the day. That's when you daven Mincha Katana. So near that means you can go up to 9 hours. So in other words, up until 3 hours before sunset is when you're permitted to eat on Erev Pesach. Except, if you remember, Rav Yossi said, Ad Shetechshach. He said you could eat until dark. Remember that? And there was a considerable outcry when we said that, because what are you talking about? How is that possible, right? Ada particularly was upset that we said Ad Shetechshach. We know that can't be. So then we talked about how could it actually take place, that people are eating a meal Friday afternoon and or Erev Pesach, and this year Pesach is Friday night, right? Mm-hmm. So they're eating a meal Friday afternoon and it got dark on them. How could that possibly have taken place? So I brought you a handout, and what this is a copy of an excerpt from a letter that was written in 1488. And we're going to try to get through it in Hebrew. I put in brackets the part that is germane to what we're talking about. This is a book. It's called Igros Eretz Yisrael, Igrot Eretz Yisrael. It was actually put together, I guess, about 60 or 70 years ago, and it's letters that were written by either residents or travelers to Eretz Yisrael to their family members or the communities in the diaspora. The first one was written by Yirmiyahu HaNavi, and it went all the way up to 1921, a letter written by someone who was living in the Yishuv at that point to relatives. And the particular one that we're talking about was written by Rav Avadia Bartanura. He's one of the most famous.
Wine is named after?
His pardon? Bartanura, right? We drink his wine all the time, right? So Bartanura, he came from the town in Italy called Bertinoro, and I guess the Hebrew version came to Bartanura, and he traveled. He lived in Italy, and he was one of our most famous commentaries. Actually, if you study the Mishnah, like we do in Mishnah Yomit, the most important commentator is the Bartanura. And he lived from 1445 to 1515. In 1487, he decided that he needed to go to Eretz Yisrael. And he made Aliyah. It took him almost 2 years to get there. And in 1488, he wrote a letter to his father describing his travels. It's fascinating because it took him a long period of time. He went from Italy to Israel, which today is, how long does it take by plane to go from Italy to Israel? An hour, right? By the time you get to the airport and get home. So a very short trip, but it took him almost 2 years. They traveled by ship, they traveled by camel, some on foot, and the route that they had to take across the desert and so on. And not too long after he got there, he wrote a letter to his father describing what he had seen along the way, and in a certain sense apologizing that he had left the father behind, but he felt that he really had to do it. He came to Yerushalayim, and he became the leader of the Jewish community in Israel, which at that time was very poor and very small. There were very few Jews living there. There have always been Jews living in Israel. There's never been a time that Jews did not live there, but at that point, it was a very small, poor community. And he became the leader of the community, and he describes some of what he has seen. So what I put into brackets for you, it's on the second page, but it's the first one that's interesting to us. And if we can get to the other one, we'll do that. But he says, if we try to read along with me if you can in the Hebrew. He says, "Haminhag b'chol eretz Yishmael la-Yehudim." So in all of Yishmael, that's the second son, right, of Yitzchak. He had right of Avram, right? He had Yitzchak and Yishmael, and Yishmael is the father of the Arabs, right? So all of the Arab countries where Jews are living. So what Rabbi Bartanura observed, he says, "Erev Shabbos, shahochin kulan lebeis hamerchatz." First of all, they all go to the bathhouse. Yeah. They all take a bath. Everybody, Erev Shabbos. Ubeshuvam, and when they return, meviot nishotehem lifnehem, their wives bring before them yayin umarbin b'shutiyah. Their wives bring them wine, and they drink a lot of wine. Right? This is what they do Friday afternoon. This is Erev Shabbos.
Talking about the Arabs.
Pardon?
We're talking about the Arabs.
No, we're talking about the Jews. We're talking about the Jews living in the Arab countries. It's the Arabs. Right. So the Jews who are living in the Arab countries, this is how they conduct themselves on Friday afternoon. So pay attention, Ada, because you're going to hear what they do. So first they come home from the bath. The wives give them wine, and they drink plenty of it. Okay. Vachar mevin hatavshil sheichinu l'seudat ha'erev, and then they bring them. The wives serve them the meal that they prepared for the evening meal. Now it's not Shabbos. This is Friday afternoon, right? Ochlim mebod yom, and they eat during the day. And then what are those two words, Rita? Ad shetechshach, which is Ad shetechshach. They eat. So this was how they practiced on a regular weekly basis. So the Jews are living in the Arab countries. Friday afternoon they would eat a big meal, and they would eat until dark. Okay, and then achar shechashecha v'shasu v'shikru, and after it became dark and they drank so much that they became intoxicated. Then ba'im kulam. Then all of them went to the Beis HaKnesses. They went to shul. V'levushim nekiyim meguhatzim, and they went with their fine, clean clothing, right? So they came home. They went to take a bath. They came home. They drank. They ate. It got dark. Then they went to shul. Okay.
It was not washed and dry. It was ironed.
That's right. It was pressed clothing. Right, B'shirot v'tishbachos, and they would sing songs and give praise to Hashem. Umarichem betfilat arvit ad shtei shaot, and they would spend 2 hours. They spent 2 hours in their evening prayer on Friday night. Okay, so they daven ad shtei shaot b'alayla and 2 hours into the night. And that point, ubar leveitayim, then they went home. Ubar leveitayim, after 2 hours into the night, umekachim, then they made kiddush. Vothlin kazayit lechem bilvat, then they ate a small amount. The kazayit is the volume of an olive, which is the minimum quantity required in order to need to bench afterwards. And then mevarchin birkat hamazon, and then they would bench. So that was their practice. So this idea that the Gemara is saying that you could eat until it got dark, that's what they did. Okay, and he goes on to describe how he made changes, that because they also used to daven mincha at home, they didn't daven mincha in shul as we do, and he
it is now.
So right now Friday afternoon, towards evening we go to shul and we daven mincha in shul, and then some places wait a period of time. We don't. We daven right away. Kabbalah Shabbos, but the point is that in their communities they daven mincha at home by themselves. Then they had the big meal. Then they went to shul and they daven the evening prayer for Shabbos. And when they came home, they made kiddush. They had a small amount of bread, and they benched.
I
And
think
that was
this is where they developed it. That now in our days, I know people that are sick and cannot eat late at night after davening. Will eat the meal before going to shul, and then they come home just kazai.
Right. We used to do that. We used to do that sometimes because our kids were small, and when the days were long, it wasn't right because if you couldn't do it because the kids would go to sleep. So we would do that, but we didn't realize we were doing the customs of the Jews living in the Arab countries. So this is written in 1488, and apparently it had been going on for some period of time. History, that's right. Ein chadash tachat hashemesh, right? There's nothing new under the sun. So that's where. So the Gemara is telling us that this is a practice. This is what they did, and here we have an eyewitness that observed this taking place. Okay. So here we go. So we're at the next to the last line. If you're on the Hebrew side. So he says, right? So they would bring them the wine. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Ocha v'holech ad shetech, that people would eat until it got dark, and then Gamru Kos Rishon, Mavarech Alav Birkas Hamazon. They finished the first cup of wine. They would bench on that. V'Hasheni Omer Alav Kedushas Hayom. And on the second cup now they would say Kiddush. Okay, so similar, not quite the same, but they're saying that they would. So this is actually a third style, right? Where they would bench after the first one, and then they would make kiddush. Amai. So the Gemara says, why did they do that way? Because why don't they say v'nerminu l'travayu achad akasa? Why don't they use 1 cup of wine and use it for benching and for kiddush, right? Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Sheshes. Rav Huna says the name of Rav Sheshes, Ein omrim shetei kedushos al kos. You don't use 1 cup and make 2 kedusha, make 2 brachos on 1 cup. Why? My time. Why not? I hear you, and I know that's how we practice, but what's the reason for that? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, Lefi she'ein osim mitzvos chavilos. We don't treat our mitzvos like we want to bundle them up because we want to get it over with, right? We don't want to. We want to enjoy each mitzvah by itself. We're not looking to rush out and just lump them all together. So we don't do that. So, but the Gemara said, hang on a second. He said below, is that so that we don't group our mitzvahs together? But Tanya, we learned in a brisa, right? Or brita, remember that is written by Tanaim, right? But at the same time as the Mishnah, but it didn't make it into the Mishnah, but it still is authoritative. Somebody comes home Saturday night, Mavarech al hayayin al ha'ma'or, so he makes the bracha on the wine and on the candle, al habasamim, and on the spices. Remember that, because that's going to be a question right away. V'achakach omer havdalah al hakos. And after that, he makes Havdalah al hakos. So he 1 cup, right? Right. So So v'im ein lo ela kos echad manicho lachar hamazon. If he only has one cup of wine, so this cup that he was going to use for Havdalah, he puts it aside, and he includes it, he says it together with the cup that he's going to use for benching. So here, you just told me that we don't bundle our mitzvahs together, and here we have a brisa, which is certainly authoritative, that says, here's a case where a person comes home, makes Havdalah, does not drink the wine, then he's going to have his meal, he's going to bench, and he's going to use that cup of wine for his benching. So it's one cup, two mitzvahs. So are we bundling or are we not bundling? Right? The Gemara said we don't, and here we have a higher authority, right? Previous generation saying that we do. So how do you explain that? So the Gemara says, Ein lo shani. That's if he only has one. So let's say all he has is one cup of wine, and he has the two mitzvahs to do. So then he could wait and use that one cup. Okay. So how about this? The Gemara says, Yom Tov shechalios achar Shabbos. So how about a Yom Tov which comes out on Saturday night, right? Which can happen. That comes that, what? We have it, sure, plenty of times. It happens that Yom Tov starts on Saturday night. The Islay, and he has wine, because the assumption is that when you come into Yom Tov, you've gotten together all the materials you're going to be using for the Yom Tov, and along with that is enough wine to last you for the week, and if my kids come, we have to have a lot of different kinds because they know wine, so you have to have the wine prepared. So that means so if the Yom Tov started on Saturday night, he has plenty of wine, so why would he need to delay or hold that one cup and drink it together? Rav, so Rav says, what is the case? The case is Yayin Kuf Nun Hey, which stands for what, Rita? Yayin Kuf Nun Hey. Yayin, Kiddush, Ner, Havdalah, right? So what are we missing? We're missing Zman, we're missing Besamim, right? So Amri, Midalo Amar Zman, since he did not say Zman, which is Shechiyanu, right? Normally on a Yontif, you say Shechiyanu. This time you didn't say it. Why? Miklal de B'Shvi Shel Pesach Askinan. We must be talking about the seventh day of Pesach, which is a Yom Tov, right? We don't drive, right? But there's no Shechiyanu, right? And that's the only Yom Tov in the year, actually, when we do not make a Shechiyanu, right? So even Shmini Atzeres, so we make the Shechiyanu on the first days of Sukkot. Come Shmini Atzeres, we make a Shechiyanu because it's in a Yom Tov, right? So the only time of the year that we have a Yom Tov, which means we observe all the restrictions of Yom Tov, but we don't make a Shechiyanu, is the seventh day of Pesach, and therefore, at that point, the Chol Mai Dahavale Ochale. So now it's already the seventh day of Pesach. All the wine that he had prepared before Pesach, could be they've used it up already. And all he has left is one cup. And therefore, he'll use that one cup for both purposes.
I have a question.
Sure.
I didn't understand that they have a cup of wine with the benching. We never have that. That means that there's more than 3 people or 10 people.
So when, right, there are different customs. Most of us do not bench with a cup of wine, but if you come to shul on Shalosh Seudos, they will bench with a cup of wine. That's a minyan of people. Sometimes even, at Shalosh Seudos we certainly have a minyan, but some people, even when they don't have a minyan, that was the practice, that they would bench with a cup of wine at the end.
But they take the same
Everybody has
cup
different
filled with the
minhagim.
wine and use that for Havdalah. Because it's the same cup.
Well, so that's the question. The question is, first of all, when did you make Havdalah, before you ate after Shabbos, or are you saying you take the wine from Shalosh Seudos, save that to use it later for Havdalah?
That's what they do in shul.
So that's the point. So there's another reason for it too, because why are they doing it in shul and not drinking from it? Because they're going to be saving for Havdalah, they're going to drink it later, and by the time we're getting around to benching at Shalosh Seudos, is probably Shabbos is almost over as well. So, but the point is that here we have a situation where we have the one cup, and now the question is, what are we missing? So again, what's happening here? We have Yain, Kiddush, Ner, Havdalah. Right. We said we're missing Zman, so we explained that, right? Because there's no Shechiyanu. So Rita wants to know why there's no Besamim. So Somebody have an idea?
I'm not sure I'm right, because with some you could, there's no mafdel, you can also make a bracha and on the samim and chol, so why would you do it in the Havdalah for Yom Tov? It's not,
Okay, honey?
When after Havdalah, we have the something, because we're saying goodbye to Shabbos and we're gonna miss it.
We're saying goodbye to Shabbos and we're gonna miss it.
Therefore, we have the something as a compensation, and if there's a holiday right afterwards, we're gonna miss Shabbos, but then we'll still be happy because there's a holiday.
Okay? You're not cooking, are you? You're happy you get 2 more days to cook. Okay?
Might it have something to do with, on Shabbos we're prohibited from malacha, and the same does not apply to a Yom Tov, there are less malacha, I mean, you can do more malacha.
Right, you can cook. Okay, so let's see what the commentaries have to say. So if you're in the Hebrew, it's on page 204 if you open the book from the right-hand side. Okay? So let me show you where we are on the page. So this is that page 204. Come down to close to the bottom, and you see where it says Rav in large letters. Okay, so where we are, we're in Tosafot. Tosafot, remember, are commentaries that succeeded Rashi. So many of them are Rashi's sons-in-law, his grandsons, whatever, and they provide additional commentary. So they deal with the same question because it bothered them the same way as it bothered us, and they want to come up with a solution for it. So it says, Rav Amar Yaknaha, right? Yain Kuf Nun Hey. So the question is, Umash Ein Maskir B'Samim. And they're not mentioning the B'Samim. Why not, right? So Peresh Rashbam, so they're quoting the Rashbam, another commentary, slightly older than them. It says, Datam B'Samim, the reason for the B'Samim is Mishum Ibud Neshama Yisera. So we say that on Shabbos we have the Shema Yetera, right? That we have an additional soul that comes into our bodies on Shabbos, and when that neshama is leaving us, so we have the B'Samim, but it'll be Yom Tov, Nami Ika Neshama Yisera. And on Yom Tov, there is that same concept, that Neshama Yetera, that we have that on Yom Tov, and therefore, but he says V'Kosha, he says it's difficult, Tosfos says. Dim Kain B'Motza Yom Tov, if so, when Yom Tov ends, Amaylo Takina B'Samim. So why, if you say to me, the reason, so Saturday night, Yom Tov starts, so we don't do B'Samim, and if your answer is because we have the Neshama Yetera on Yom Tov, but then when Yom Tov ends, we don't say B'Samim then either. So if we're saying that we have that extra Neshama on Yom Tov, why do we not use the B'Samim on Motzah or Yom Tov? Okay, so he says it's difficult. Dim came b'motza Yom Tov, amai lo takinu b'samim. Why not? Lekach nira dib Yom Tov. Therefore, it appears, he says on Yom Tov, leka neshama yisera, says Tosfos. Seems like maybe that neshama yisera does not appear, does not join us on Yom Tov. V'acha ein mazkir b'samim, and therefore we do not mention the b'samim. Mishum de simchas Yom Tov. Since the joy of the Yom Tov, v'achilo shasiya moil kamo b'samim. So the simcha, the joy of the Yom Tov, acts like the b'samim. V'yesh ta'amim lo nechonim. And he says that there are other reasons that people give, but they're not correct. Okay? V'zeh ha'tam nachon v'ikari. And he says this, what I just told you, is so I'm sure that there are plenty of people who differ with him, but he had the courage to say this is the correct answer. That we enter into Yom Tov, we're going to be b'simcha, it's Yom Tov, and therefore the b'samim would be superfluous, so we don't do it. So there you go. So now when your grandkids ask you how come we don't use b'samim on Saturday night going into Yom Tov.
I've been to a house where someone makes the bracha on the Shabbos at the table. He has the summon sitting there, and he makes the because he has his extra brachas, and this is one of the extra brachas that he needs.
When is he doing that? Is that a Shabbos meal, Friday night, Saturday? At a Shabbos meal, he's, okay. I don't know, our custom on Sukkot, when we take the lulav and esrog for the first time, so in our family, we make a bracha on the aroma of the esrog. Not everybody does that. So there are all kinds of customs. Look, we've developed over millennia, and so that's happening. So I don't know. You know, I'm going to ask Mindel now to just pan around the room with the camera, just to show what a kind of an audience that we have here. But I'll take the questions while